There's an alarming trend that needs international attention right now. Young people dying at an alarming rate. These people are from the age of 0 to 24 years old.
Which is an unacceptably broad group of people, because someone who dies at 6 months is very different than someone who dies at 23.
Right. Someone who can't
the
feed
government
themselves.
so whoever is doing this research is purposely keeping those categories overly broad.
Yeah. It's really troubling, and we don't have enough data on it. I mean, this is the problem. We have certain data points about these deaths, but we don't have any sort of large international look at why this is happening. So new numbers out of the United States shows a total of about 17,000 excess deaths. Many reports are showing sudden cardiac arrhythmia. Children who are fine one moment, doing just fine, and then the next minute just dropping dead. This is an anecdotal story, but we could pick hundreds of them to talk about. This one, reading Illinois Representative Sean Casten, reveals that his teenage daughter died from sudden cardiac arrhythmia. People, this is not okay. He's a Democrat. He announced Friday that his daughter's death back in June was from cardiac arrhythmia. He says, this past June, our daughter Gwen Casten died of a sudden cardiac arrhythmia. In layman's terms, she was fine, and then her heart stopped. She had just come home from an evening out with friends, went to bed, and then didn't wake up. So let's look at the current American death rates. These are the current ones as of this hour here on my laptop, Philip, if you can take that. So this is the mortality rates right now, all the way up through September. Now, what's interesting is that earlier today, or I said like earlier this morning, this little curve was starting to go down, but now it's not. It's going up. So just look at this from 2020. Okay, here we are, 2020. Look at this increase. Let me see if I can get the little thing to pop up here. 2021 is right here, all the way up 2022, March, May, July, September.
We should clarify what we mean by excess deaths, because the government runs algorithms of how many deaths they expect per year around flu season, around holidays, from things like drunk driving, from things like aging. Those things are expected deaths. We are seeing this excess of deaths that is inexplicable. Some of them are related to heart disease. Many of them are related to cancer. And this is being duplicated in all throughout Europe, in the United Kingdom, and in the United States. And again, we're getting these groups of people that we can't really extrapolate much from. Why would a healthy teenager die versus why would a healthy child die versus why would a healthy middle-aged person die? We just don't get the data. We were warned that there would be a cancer spike in both cancers and deaths, because during the pandemic, there was so little cancer screening. So many what we called non-essential doctor's appointments for routine screenings were canceled or put off for too long. This is this a natural result of the fact that all of a sudden all these cancers caught up and people caught them too late? That's a pertinent question. There are so many factors that absolutely necessitate more research.
So here's the CDC's data. So this is the CDC's data as of this morning on excess deaths. Now, what's interesting on this screen here, see those little like check marks. So you see the red line and the orange line in your screen, okay? That's sort of the average where we would expect deaths to occur. Like that's the average, and that's the normal range. Everything above that red line are excess deaths, and you can see all of the plus signs. Those are plus signs all over those hills and valleys at the top. Those are excess. That's way beyond what they normally experience. So this is from the CDC's own data on these excess deaths. And again, 17,000 in the United States. On a daily basis, or on, when we get the data in the UK, it's actually worse. The data is not as up to date as it is in the United States. So we need more accurate data, more up to date data from the UK. Dr. John Campbell says we absolutely need an international body looking at this, because this is troubling. Listen.
some of these could be COVID related, others will not be COVID related. I suspect the majority are not directly COVID infection related. And we really need a massive national inquiry into this. We need to know what's going on here. We've flagged this up many times on this channel. Mainstream media just not seem to be picking this up. But I find it personally quite alarming, the lack of interest in this in mainstream media. And by the academic and scientific and government community just astounds me. Yet the data is here. We're talking about life and death of many, many people here. These excess deaths are a real phenomena.
Now, we see those of you in the chat saying, well, were these people vaccinated? That's a good question. That is maybe the question. But none of this data is parsed out that way. Nobody seems willing to look into that. It's not even an option to ask that question, and absolutely it should be.
So, well, I would be curious to take first of all, I'm surprised they're not, calling this the Putin death hike. But second of all, it's like, do these numbers correlate with what we're hearing from morticians? Like that, all that data, like what are they seeing? Like how many percentage of these excess are they seeing with the story, like the story we covered a couple weeks ago? I can't remember what we can and can't say, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, the clotting of the blood.
Interesting. Do like morticians have an algorithm for how many people they expect to die? Do they have a busy season?
Right. Well, we've heard, we've covered on the show the number of young people. I mean, we've covered here on this show. Of course, we always want to be very careful.
Yeah, let's not.
But we've covered here on the show a number of morticians around the world saying they've seen a huge increase in the number of small coffins that they're ordering and that they're having to deal with, and a huge uptick in the amount of young people that they're having to embalm. So
right, because that correlates with the demographics that we're talking about, 0 to 24. That is the demographic that they are also seeing. So there has to be some kind of correlation that they would be able to have data on.
Yeah. So we can't say, right? Could it be that this population got overly stressed during lockdowns? Could it be that this population got more unhealthy than they already were due to, I don't know, bad dietary habits, sedentary lifestyles? Could it be there's so many things that we could factor into this that we should be able to if the research were being done?
Someone in the chat just says, yeah, morticians have been sounding the alarm, whistleblowing on this for months, and we've covered it here on the show, and we've also covered how they've been banned and blocked and kicked off social media. So, of course, the establishment doesn't want you to hear this news. They don't want you to know what's going on. And a few weeks ago, of course, President Biden on 60 Minutes said that the pandemic is over. It's done. And then he came out yesterday and said this.
Virtually every COVID death in America is preventable. Virtually everyone. Almost everyone who will die from COVID this year will not be up to date on their shots, or they will not have taken Paxlovid when they got sick.
What? Okay, so every person who dies this year, according to the President of the United States, will have not been up to date on a booster shot. And by the way, he then today got his fifth booster shot, which is stunning.
Yes.
Did he though? Did he really though?
I know that's the question. But we saw him sitting there in the basement little theater that he's got set up, and they did a whole little thing where they had the nurse come in with a mask on and gave it to him and says, "This is my fifth shot." And then he did a FaceTime call with Dr. Fauci, and they were and he tweeted it out, "Hey, I got my fifth booster shot." So there you go. But he's saying, so this point, let's go back to this soundbite though.
Yeah. Him saying that everyone who dies of COVID will be unvaccinated. Philip was pointing out this morning that given the fact that the booster acceptance is so low, and they don't consider you fully vaccinated unless you've had a booster. It's easy for them to say that now because most people are unlikely to have their boosters updated. And so if they even had the original shot, they will say, well, see, you weren't up to date. So they can say that, even though some statistics have seemed to indicate that people who are unvaccinated do not actually have more of a risk of I'm not going to finish that.
Nev CM3
Well, I was
in
gonna
our
say-
chat, in our Rumble chat, says morticians and insurance companies have also seen massive death claims jump from 25 to 40-year-olds as well. Yes, I've been reading that as well on the insurance side. So go ahead, David.
I was going to say also, maybe they want to stop using Biden as a spokesperson for that, because like it's like he's on his 5th booster, but he's also continuing to decline mentally. So it's like,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
not a good poster child.
Yeah. At some point, like, do you say to like the doctors, okay, this is your 5th one now, and you've had COVID? How many times has he had it now?
Well, 2, but it was a 1-2 punch.
Okay. And then Walensky, the CDC director, last week, she got her booster. She's up to date. And then she got COVID this week. So, okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's the data. We need an international body to come together and look at all of this data and really do a thorough analysis of it and give us an honest answer. We're starting to see at least some revelations appearing, at least on the CDC's website, right? We're starting to see that, well, the CDC is starting to update data about myocarditis and other things. So that's at least encouraging. We're starting to see actual data coming forward.
Yeah.
And maybe we'll see, and we're getting maybe perhaps better data now, at least from some of the adverse effects reporting on the CDC side, but we're not getting it still from the UK.
Right.
So,
Well, and
anyway.
I was saying too, I did a video on locals. I was talking about how it's getting easier to talk about mainstream. You got Washington Post saying stuff. You've got some very credible doctors now coming forward and talking. And it's like the more you hear from people that are credible, like a doctor that the information is getting out there. So I think that the data is finally catching up, and more people are realizing what we've been talking about for the past 2 years.